Hello friends, welcome back to Dinas Academy, and in this video we are going to discuss the important parts of speech, that is verb. So without any further delay, let's get into the topic. Verbs are the hearts of English sentence. So what is a verb? A verb is a word or a combination of words that indicates action or a state of being or condition. A verb is the part of a sentence that tells us what the subject performs. So let's understand this with the examples. The first example, Ram walks in the morning. Here in the given example, walks is a verb and this example shows a usual action. Let's move to the next example. Mike is going to school. And in this example, is going are the verbs and this sentence shows a condition of action. The third example, Ashok does not like to walk. Here, does not like are the verbs and this shows a negative action. Let's move on to the last example. Priya is a good girl. And in the given example, is a verb and this example shows a state of being. So, verbs are related to a lot of other factors like the subject, person, number, tense, mood, voice, etc. Based upon all this, the verbs are mainly divided into two types. The first types of verbs are basic forms of verbs. There are six basic forms of verb and they are base form, infinitive, past tense, past participle, present participle, and gerund. So let's understand all the six basic forms in detail. The first form of verb is base form. In English grammar, the base form of a verb is its simplest form. These exist without a special ending or suffix on their own but can be changed and added on to fit different uses and tenses. For example, children play in the field. Here in the given example, play is a verb and it is in base form as it does not have any ending or suffixes. So let's move to the next basic form of verb, that is infinitive. Infinitives are special form of verbs that can be used as a noun, adjective or adverb. They are usually made by adding the word to before the base verb and they can be useful when discussing action without actually doing the action. For example, tell them not to play. And in the given example, to play is the infinitive verb because to is added for the base form of verb play. So the next type of basic form of verb is past tense. It is a verb which depicts an action that has already happened at a specific time, then the verb is in the past tense. For example, they played football yesterday. And in the given example, played is a verb and it is a past tense of the base form of the verb play. So play is a base form, to play is infinitive, and played is a past tense. So let's move to the next type of basic form of verb, that is past participle. It is a verb that refers to an action that was started and completed entirely in the past. It is a third principal part of a verb created by adding ed, d, or t to the base form of a regular verb. For example, I have eaten a burger, and in the given example, eaten is a verb and it has taken the form of en to the base form eat. The next type of base form of verb is present participle. It is a verb that typically expresses present action in relation to the time expressed by the finite verb in its clause and that in English is formed with the suffix ing and is used in the formation of the progressive or continuous tenses. For example, I saw them playing with him today. Here in the given example, playing is a present participle because it is taking ing form for the base form of verb play. So let's move on to the next type of basic form of verb, that is gerund. A gerund is a form of verb that ends in ing that is used as a noun and hence we call gerund as verbal nouns. For example, swimming is the best exercise. Okay, These are the six basic forms of the verb. And now let's move to the different types of the verb. The first different type of the verb is main verb or base verb. The base verb is the form of a verb where it has no ending like ing, ed, or en added to it. It is also called the root verb since it is the very root form of a verb. For example, I go to school every day. And in this example, go is a base verb as it does not have any suffixes added to it. So let's move to the next type of verb, that is regular verb. The verbs that follow the most usual conjugation are called regular verbs. It is regular since it abides by most, if not all, of the regular grammar rules that are, for example, Rehan plays cricket. The next one, Tam called out my name. In the both the examples, plays and called are regular verbs. So let's move to the next type of verb, that is irregular verbs. The verbs that have irregularities in terms of following grammar rules are called irregular verbs. For example, do the dishes. The second example, I hardly ever drink enough water in a day. In the both the example, do and drink are the irregular verbs. Alright, let's understand the major differences between regular and irregular verbs. In the previous examples, in regular verb, we have used the verbs like place and called. When we change them into V2 and V3 form, that is past tense and past participle, the verb plays turns into played, played, and hence the verb played takes a regular form while changing into past and past participle, that is ed. But when it comes to irregular verbs, they take irregular forms like drink, drank, drunk, shake, shook, shaken. The next type of verb is transitive verb. It is a verb which uses a direct object and which shows who or what receives the action in a sentence. For example, she gives a gift. And in this example, gives is a transitive verb and gift is a direct object. In general terms, transitive verb is a verb that uses object. Let's move on to the next type of verb, that is intransitive verb. It is a verb that does not take a direct object. It means there's no word in the sentence that tells who or what received the action of the verb. For example, it rained. The next one, my store opened. In the both the examples, rained and opened are the verbs, but they're intransitive verbs as they does not require any object to make it a sense. The next type of verb is weak verb. The verbs that end with d and t in their past indefinite and past participle form are weak verbs. There is a tendency to associate weak verbs with regular verbs, but not all weak verbs are regular verbs in the English language. For example, spend, spent, walk, walked, book, booked. Okay, the next type of verb is strong verb. These verbs are those in which the vowels in the verb stem changes from I to A to U in the present indefinite to past participle form of verb. For example, ring, rang, rung. When we observe these words closely, we can see I to A to U, that is ring, rang, rung. And the next example verb is drink, drank, drunk. Here we can see the verb stem changes from I to A to U. So let's move to the next type of verb, that is finite verbs. Finite verbs are the actual verbs that are called the roots of a sentences. It is a form of a verb that is performed by or refers to a subject and uses one of the 12 forms of tenses and changes according to the number, person of the subject. For example, Alice went to school. Here, the subject Alice performed the action in the past. This information is evident only by the verb went in the sentence. Let's understand this with one more example. He is one of the best players. Here in the example, the verb is directly refers to the subject itself. Okay, the next type of verb is non-infinitive verb. These verbs are not actual verbs. They do not work as verbs in the sentence, rather, they work as the nouns, adjectives, adverbs, etc. And these verbs do not change according to the number or person of the subject because these verbs are also called verbals. Sometimes they become the subject themselves. There are three forms of non-finite verbs. They are infinitive, gerund, and participle. A word of caution while using the participles because the participle becomes finite verbs when they take the auxiliary verbs. Okay, the next type of verb is action verb. It is a verb which indicates what the subject of a sentence performs. Action verbs can make the listener or reader feel emotions, see scenes more vividly and accurately. And action verbs can be both transitive or intransitive verbs. For example, I painted the car, and the next example, she smiled. And in the both the examples, painted and smiled are the action verbs. So let's move on to the next type of verb, that is linking verb. It is a verb that adds details about the subject of a sentence. In its simplest form, it connects the subject and the complement, that is, the words that follow the linking verb. It creates a link between them instead of showing action. Generally, linking verbs are called be verbs like am, is, are, was, were. However, there are some other verbs like act, feel, remain, appear, and so on. Let's move on to the next type of verb, that is auxiliary verbs. These are also called helping verbs. It is a verb that extends the main verb by helping to show time, tense, and possibilities. The auxiliary verbs are be verbs, have verbs, and do verbs, and they are generally used in continuous or progressive tenses. For example, they are walking in the park. The next one, I have seen a movie. And the major difference between linking verb and auxiliary verbs is linking verbs work as a main verbs in the sentence, but auxiliary verbs help main verbs. And let's move on to the next type of verb, that is modal verbs. A modal verb is a kind of auxiliary verb. It assists the main verb to indicate possibility, potentiality, ability, permission, exception, and obligation. The main modal verbs are can, could, must, may, might, shall, should, will, would. For example, she should call him, and the next one, I will go there. In the both the examples, should and will are the modal verbs. The next type of verb is reflexive verb. When the subject and the object are the same, and the verb reflects on the subject, that is a reflexive verb. These verbs are often used with the reflexive pronouns like myself, himself, herself, itself, etc. Let's see the examples. First one, he has done it himself. The next example, I will watch it myself. Well, let's move on to the next type of verb, that is ergative verb. These are the verbs which can be used both as transitive and intransitive verb. They are also called as libel verb in English. The examples are I opened the door. The next one, the door opens. When we look at these two examples closely, the first one is used in a transitive verb and the second example is used in intransitive verbs respectively. Hence, the verbs which can be used in transitive and intransitive verbs are called ergative verb. Let's move on to the next type of verb, that is phrasal verb. An idiomatic phrase consisting of a verb and other element, most likely an adverb or a preposition, is called a phrasal verb. For example, she broke down in tears. And in this example, broke is a verb and down is a preposition. And hence, broke down is a phrasal verb. Let's move on to the next type of verb, that is lexical verb. Lexical verb is a main or principal verb of a sentence which typically takes the major responsibility of a verb that represents the action of the noun or pronoun. For example, he ran to his father. And the next example, Reena tried her best. In the both the examples, ran and tried are the lexical verb. Okay, let's move to the next type of verb, that is delexical verb. Delexical verbs lack importance when it comes to the meaning, since these verbs hardly have meanings of their own when used individually. Some of the delexical verbs are take, have, make, give, etc. So let's see the example. He took a shower. The next one, I had a cold drink. Alright, let's move to the next type of verb, that is stative verb. The verbs that describe the state of being are called statitative or being verbs. For example, I need some boxes. The next one, he smells danger. And in the both the examples, need and smells are the statitative verb. The next type of verb is dynamic verb. The verb that entails continuous or progressive action of the subject are called dynamic or finitive verbs. They express the subject's state of being on the move. For example, he is running fast. The next one, keep hitting the ball hard. In the both the examples, running and hitting are the dynamic words because they express the subject being on the move. Okay, the next type of verb is non-continuous verb. The verbs that are usually never used in their continuous forms are called non-continuous verbs. For example, I like to swim. Here, like is a verb in the given example, and we cannot use this word that is like in a continuous form like I am liking to swim. Hence, like is a non-continuous tense. Let's move to the next type of verb, intensive verb. The verbs that focus intensely on just the subject are called intensive verbs. Intensive verbs are also called linking or coupler verbs. For example, you seem happy. The next one, she looks stunning. In the both the example, seem and looks are the intensive verbs. Okay, let's move to the other type of verb, that is extensive verb. All the verbs that do not focus intensely on just the subject as the intensive verbs of the sentence are extensive verbs. For example, he loves her, and the next example, Rohan sells fish. And in the both the examples, loves and sells are extensive verb. Okay guys, these are the different types of verbs that we use in English grammar, and in the upcoming videos we are going to discuss about each type of verb in detail. That's all in this video guys, and if you really like the effort and the content that we are putting into this channel, please like, share and subscribe our channel. Thanks for watching.